Hey everybody, welcome to another session of Control+M Presents. We want to thank you very much for joining us today. As a reminder to all the attendees, we are recording the session, so you're all on mute. When Zach gets around to question time, you're just going to have to remember to unmute yourselves. So today, our Zack Farley is going to talk about average material costing in the Plex standard costing module. While it might be average costing, I'm sure his session will be far above average. Zach's been with Control+M since 2017. He's been working with Plex since 2015. He's one of two CPAs on our staff that's dedicated solely to Plex. And he not only came to us with that pedigree, but he's also a certified project manager with past experience in auditing. So he's in a really unique position, not only to help you sift through your costing and accounting questions, but also really to suss out business units issues and come to terrific resolutions for you. So without any further ado, take it away, Zach.
We hope all of you are having a great day, and obviously the people that know me here know that I can speak roughly at the speed of a redneck auctioneer, so I'm going to try to go slow. We're going to open up with a couple of disclaimers here. This is definitely not financial advice. We're not acting as your advisor in this video. We're going to show you some tricks that Plex has up its sleeve that are kind of known, kind of not known, whatever. As per usual, different configurations will give you different results. So we're going to kind of talk through some of the potholes we can all step in and twist our ankles. If you like this and you wonder if it's right for you, trust your audit or tax professional. Those guys are going to keep you rich. And through some of this discussion, I will kind of go way, way backward, like none of you have ever seen Plex before, and scoot my way forward, only because it's hard to make a recommendation of, hey, go look at this construct if you don't know what the other constructs are. So what are we going to talk about? What costing methods are running around in Plex? Why you might want to deal with average costing? Hey, how does this freaking thing work? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? Care and maintenance, we love that. And then if you guys have any questions and nobody's fully asleep, we'll keep talking. So in Plex, we've got standard costing, right? We're all going to take a 30-second thing about standard costing is we decide that each widget is worth X amount of dollars, and then we compare actuals against that. There's a whole budget process. We'll get to that in a minute, yada, yada, yada. But standard is we're just going to tie one cost to a part, and we're going to stare at the differences and try to fix them. In Plex has something called pure actual costing. So pure actual costing is I'm going to take whatever I pay for a piece of material, and that's my material cost. I'm going to take whatever time and rate is allotted to production and cram that into a serial number, and that's my value add cost. And when I ship that rascal, that's my cost of goods sold. Could be good, could be bad, but it is quote unquote actual. There is job actual, which takes those two constructs and kind of splits the difference and goes, hey, we sure would like to look at the reporting from actual costing. However, we don't want to really fix any problems that come around, so we're just going to post the standards because that's relatively bomb-proof, and we do like that. Nice, way to get around things. And hiding in standard costing is a weird happy medium called average costing. And so, like many things in Plex, we got to talk about. Plex calls this average costing. But it's only average for the raw material component of the cost. So I can't average cost my labor and overhead. I can't average cost my subcon. It's just what I'm buying. I hope that all makes sense. So why in the world would you even be interested in this? So I'll give you a little background on me. Patty went into that. I was the head of finance in some metal fab things, and here's how our life went. from November to roughly January, we had what should have been called budget season, which was chaos. Salesmen would get together and be like, "Oh, I'm going to sell all this stuff," and we would hand that over to ops and procurement. And my purchasing guys would be like, "Let me get this magic ball, crystal ball, 8-ball out, shake this rascal. Okay, we're going to pay X amount of pound for this stuff." And we'd set it, give it to the board. The board gives a thumbs up. We'd all feel great. We get into that first January close, and suddenly it's all wrong, and you're stuck now with a standard that may or may not make sense. So, what this construct does, if we think of a visual of a teeter-totter, we're going to go back to some Plex screens. We got a PPV report and a gross margin. So they're either end of my teeter-totter with their little feet hanging down. So when my PPV is giant and fat and really negative, my gross margin is up in the air with his little feet dangling because my parts don't have enough cost. Conversely, when I have great positive variance in my PPV, my gross margin is slammed into the ground because it's too fat. We've all got some owner somewhere that when we produce financials, wants us to walk them through, hey, I got standard gross margin at X. I've got actual gross margin of Y. Give me that roadmap to figure it out. There's a couple of other use cases we'll get to, but first let's just kind of walk you through where this is headed. So anybody that's seen Plex knows that the top picture is what standard costing looks like. So we've got an algorithm saying, hey, I got a $12 approved supplier price, nifty. And every time I purchase something, hey, it's 12 bucks. At the bottom, under Drake, we've got $14 cost. So intuitively, we should all know that our commodity prices are up and our gross margins have shrunk accordingly. You'll see, I was hanging out on Sunday putting this together. This is one of the few presentations I think I've done where I have to have some live data or it's a mess, and we'll get to some bumpy transitions in a minute. What this is doing, obviously, is sucking that PPV up, so I should have minimized my PPV for whatever purchase I had and direct costed it into my parts. The other handy thing here is, like anything in Plex that runs through the standard costing system, I can have multiple models going at a time. So if I ever want to get to quote unquote what my average cost is, I can always just have this run in the background and stare at it. I have several customers that use this at year end to help them prove their adjustment on their variances. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. So how does the thing work? It's obviously magic. I got a little short anecdotal story, and forward we will go. So when I first ran into this, I thought, man, this is literally the cat's meow. I win. And then I turned it on, and I was like, wait a minute, that's not doing what I think it does. So I called everybody's old friend Sherry Law, who has retired, and I said, hey, Sherry, this thing says the average cost. What are we doing here? And she said, get right back to you. Obviously had a little huddle. Came back and said, you know, when Plex was customer funded, somebody paid to have this, and it's written to their spec. So in my experience, about 85-90% of our customers can use this with a minimal amount of excitement. The other customers that have various things that they have to have in their business that foul this up, you just really cannot safely turn it on. So here's what we're after. In the end, this screen, the FIFO LIFO screen, we're going to hop into it in our little live session here in a second, is where kind of all the magic is. And let's just limp over to Plex right now here. So as I fumble through, boom, perfect. How do I get this thing to work? So I've got an operation, I got receive pound. In our process routing, We have what used to be a famous statement I used to make in the business I worked in: how fat is my part? And it was because my salesmen who were selling our simple parts wanted to know a price per pound because they wanted the quick quote. It was super exciting. So this is where I would hide how fat is my part. This is obviously a pounds operation, so it's 1 pound. Plex takes this 1 pound and it says, oh boy, everything in the world but what I want. It says, how much weight do you have on hand? And it runs back through the purchase history and the pricing to get the costs of all that weight. So anybody that can see this, first off, must have superhuman eyes. And secondly, if you're astute enough to notice that our receipt weight is less than our total weight, there's a point to that. If you're first going live on Plex, you can just turn this on, and whatever is in the primary standard cost model would just get sucked into here as the buffer for what you haven't received in the system. So we got 33,000 pounds. Let's kind of scooch over here and look at what's happening. What's going on is I got a part called coil that feeds a part called stamping. Both weights, the BOM weight of the finished good and the raw material, go into the calculation because anybody that's ever stared at the cost structure screen long enough knows that that's how Plex relates these things and pushes the cost forward. So in our happy-go-lucky average here, it's counting both pieces. In some instances, obviously, this list, which I immediately lose all the time, can be very vast. If I have a common raw material that blows into a ton of finished goods, this thing will get long and the math will get pretty interesting. And so will the purchase history. A couple of quirks here. Let's talk about just how the cost structure works on the back end. Plex gives us our own little algorithm for this. So it's deadly simple. You're coming in here and you're saying, hey, for material, go figure it out. Obviously, for the subcon, that's not a part of that, as I mentioned earlier. There are multiple algorithms. The only one I've ever used is by part, and I've only ever done it FIFO, which brings us back to this guy. In a true form of chaos, we could look at LIFO, which I don't know that anybody would be doing that nowadays. I don't know that it matters in my part, but in a legitimate business with years of history, that could get weird. But it's there if you ever want to look at it. I have maybe 2 customers that kind of look at this stuff. So the next logical thing any of you that have been in Plex for a long time would ask is, well, hey, Zach, where's $17 coming from? What's going on here? So we are looking at the receipt. And if the $17 is wrong, when I'm in my AP and I come in and voucher this dude and update this when you're configured correctly, it's going to roll through and pick off that receipt and move the number. A couple of fun things here that I'm not going to show you the nuts and bolts of how to do, but if you just think about it, it would make sense. If I wanted to land freight in my receipt, all I have to do is just increase that number, right? So there are a couple of ways to do that from a PO standpoint, or you could just do it here if your supplier is charging you for the freight. Don't make 2 lines because any other line will not roll into this grid, which is what's driving this whole deal. So with that said, you could stack this to 25 bucks, whatever. And as we're minimizing the PPV constantly, that report is going to become less and less important as we go. So I've come in here, I've updated this. I'm going to just scoot right back over my FIFO and bash this thing with a hammer. Oh boy. And like magic, hey, check it out. We got a new cost. This guy's got a new cost. Everybody's happy. So what does that mean in life as you're running through your month? This is what many of us are used to, right? Again, I've gone through my budget. My purchasing guy, who is a just bona fide wizard, said, "Hey man, it's $12." We get to the end of January, there's a war, there's embargoes, fuel costs are up, it ain't $12 anymore. So we're paying 17, we're 41% off, owner's nuts, whatever. When I come over here, this guy, the FIFO cost model is just as updatable as ever, is going to just suck that cost up and start pulling those. It's going to start direct costing all the additional that we're paying to kind of smooth this thing out. So not super magical here. The where this gets interesting is obviously at an end of the month is when you want to go blast in this deal and get it to suck everything up, do your analysis and move. So if I creep over to shame on me for not having this open. My beautiful gross margin report, everybody's favorite. And I run back here. Here we go. Same deal. I've got whatever I've got margin wise at standard. And super simply, as we start to use the FIFO, it's going to, in the example I'm giving where my commodity prices are going up, it's going to start smashing my margin to get us closer to what the actual gross margin is, at least at the material level. Let's see. Yes. And again, I have multiple customers that just from this screen alone are using this for analysis and then to get back to what is their inventory really valued when their auditors come to town, yada, 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 which brings me to Rosie, point number 3 here. If you're trapped with price testing and all that good stuff, you can fire this screen up and export the stuff and hand it to somebody. This runs independent of having the algorithm on. It just is whirling around in the background as far as I can tell. And it's chock full of fun data here. As much fun as any of this actually is. So let's see if I can get us back into my wonderful little slides here and keep cruising. Pros and cons. Obviously, we're going to get closer to actual, and I have met many, many people who are obsessed with actuals. It's not perfect, but it's closer. It does take a construct that is a little clunky, like purchase price variance, which when that thing is riding around in your income statement and it is pervasively different than you think it should be, requires a lot of explanation and care and maintenance. And it really clarifies, hey, at least from the material aspect, this is really what we're paying. Now, obviously, if you do this mid-year or something, it's not going to fix 100% of what ails you that day, but through time, it will get you closer. So the downsides of this deal, if you have a business where you go through that budgeting process, we all set a standard, we've got our budget, the board loves it, we're all going to get paid when we hit it. And I turn this thing on and use it to post my financials. Well, now purchasing kind of gets a pass because the standard is not really fixed. So you would have to think through what you'd want to do that. If you're at all familiar with the Chappelle show, this thing he hates purchasing conversions. It gets explosive with the results in that FIFO LIFO screen. A potential con is timing. So when you're a standard cost world, in theory, not a great practice, but a good theoretical one, 6 months after a month in, we can all hop into the system and close the month, right? because the cost isn't moving. We're just looking at the existence of parts, applying the cost, moving on. This is not true anymore. Timing is super important on when I hit recalc, because the FIFO LIFO screen is showing me what's on hand at that moment and blowing that through the cost structure. So it's kind of that's me being probably more excitable than I normally get. I would want to recalc close to the end of the month, right? I don't know. I don't have experience with a lot of businesses where my inventory is swinging hundreds of thousands of dollars a day in raw material, but it's possible. You would have to figure out you. Pass through sales, very unintuitive. But if I buy something and I drop ship it, or if I buy something and ship it before month end, which many of my customers do, and I don't do any conversion, Plex needs that stuff to be in inventory when I hit recalc so we can go see what it weighs. Again, it's obsessed with how fat your part is. If you have pass through sales, there's a couple of workarounds, two of which I like, one I don't. I'll go with the one I don't first. I have a customer that recalcs constantly this average cost model. And when it sees the part and the weight, it'll suck that cost in and hold it there till the next receipt. I don't like that because I come from a place that had phenomenal engineering and those guys were tinkering around constant. What I would prefer is to either set a standard and put the PPV for that part into COGS, or just put the whole receipt of that part directly into COGS and just don't worry about direct costing. Any of that would work. And again, if anybody's super interested in this and has that condition, we could get through it. The next thing, the last bullet, is the weirdest one. So when something's uncosted in a normal standard cost model, depending on what you've got going on, that's a repetitive problem, right? It's either I don't have a supplier, I bought it from a secondary supplier the first time, yada, yada, yada. There's an endless list of things, but they're pretty simple. Here, I've got existence. Did somebody put weight in my part? Is the part actually in inventory when I'm worried about it? All that stuff on top of some of the other stuff. So it can be a little clunky there. Once you get used to it, it's not that big a deal, but it kind of gives you a headache the first couple of times. So care and maintenance, super simple stuff here. Again, if you come from standard costing world in any system, we take that standard cost and we revere it as holy and never change it. Here, you don't get to do that. If I don't hit recalc at some point, I don't get an average. So I'm sad. I mean, I can see it on my FIFO screen, but I can't shove it into my COGS. The timing is, again, a concern. For me personally, I like to do this with a cost model a month. And I like to do that because it becomes intuitive. The June closing cost model goes with the June gross margin and the June PPV and the June financials. So if my owner is ever pilfering around on a day I'm not there to hand him the data, he doesn't pull June's financial results on September's cost model and call me while I'm camping, like thinking I lied to him. And then the fixing the evils of others. Invariably, somebody in one of my two favorite parts of a business, purchasing or receiving, is going to do something crazy because it just happens, right? We over receive, we got a decimal slide on our cost, whatever it is. If and when that happens, in this beautiful little construct, because again, we're riding around in standard cost town, we could simply come in here and force this cost, right? You could go, hey, I'm going to manually do this average, however I do it, shove it in here, manually lock it. And when I roll through far enough that I shouldn't be concerned with whatever bad purchase I have, then I just unlock it and let it go back to doing its job. That is possible here. It's obviously not ideal, but it's generally a question I get asked at some point. Uh, okay. Feel like we're in question time.
All right. I want to remind everybody that you're on mute. So if you do have questions, you will need to either put them in the chat or take yourself off mute.
Or both.
Yeah, you can do both.
I feel like I put a bunch of operations people to sleep.
I don't know if they're sleeping, but they're not bringing up any questions just yet. Here we go. Can you, here Melissa says, can you touch on subcontract again? Did you say you couldn't do this with subcontract?
Correct. So the subcon piece of this is I'm kind of reading through the questions. So the why of it, I don't really know. It's how you're going to like the answer here. It's how Plex wrote it. So
Well, probably how the original specifications were
yeah,
written. Perhaps the customer that paid for it didn't have subcontracting.
yeah, something funky like that. And this question is what led me to call Sherry. So it has to do with it. It is hard coded to ignore subcontracting for what that's worth.
Interesting that we had two people ask the same question. I would say, Melissa and Kurt, if you want to put this out in the community as an ideation, we'll definitely vote on that because I think this is a question we get asked a lot about. I'm
That's
looking at some of
correct.
the people on this call, and I know some of our customers who are not asking questions are on this call and have asked us for this costing model.
Yeah, and I would say that from an ideation perspective, I would round up everybody I knew to vote that up because if you could get subcontracting to do this as well, then you're getting down the road of having a pretty manageable life.
Any other questions? Maybe while we're waiting for questions, Zach, you could go to the next slide.
You can't make me.
Yes, I can. Watch this.
Uh,
See? Told ya. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Melissa says, to implement this, are there any settings changes or just the algorithm in the cost structure?
Man, that is a phenomenal question. So settings, no changes that I'm aware of. And let me say that a different way. Everyone we implement and almost everybody that are running standard cost have the requisite settings turned on. So if you were a pure actual user, that might not be true. But no settings changes. Turn the algorithm on. I would create a separate cost model and put it in that cost model.
Yep. So Kurt just create a new cost algorithm. Create a new one. Make sure you watch that primary flag too. So don't put the
Correct.
primary flag on unless you want this to be the model that gets posted. And I think you should play with it before we would recommend that. Would you agree, Zach?
100%.
All right. So while I continue to watch the chat, I want to let everybody know that by popular demand, we decided we're going to put on a show in Milwaukee. And Melissa wants to know if you can show the algorithm once more. If you'd like, Melissa, we can also email it to you as well. We're super excited to announce we're putting on a show in October. It's going to be a 2-day Plex focus session that's open to everyone in the Plex community, not just Control+M folks. A few folks in the Plex community came up with this idea last November, and we really couldn't resist returning to some of the old fun that we used to have way back when. So we got a steering committee together, sent out a survey, came up with some sessions, and we've got speakers from Control+M, obviously, Carsleen Associates, Sella Technologies, Rockwell Automation, and a few customers. Like I said, we got the topics from sending out a survey to a bunch of random users, and we selected the top 18 sessions, so 18 one-hour sessions. And we're super delighted to have a keynote by John Howard of JH2 Enterprises. He's an operations coach, and he's going to help us show you ways in Plex that you can really make a difference at your company. Jill put the website on the chat here. It's it's plexapalooza.com. So, and all those who want the algo email to them, if you'd like, we can send it back to everyone who would registered. That might be the easiest way. So,
Yeah, we'll do.
all right. So Zach, I'm going to take over sharing for just a second, and I'm going to ask you to come back because I wanted to share the agenda for Plexapalooza. So you can see we've got speakers from Rockwell. We're going to be talking about the new IntelliPlex, some EDI roundtables, a couple of customer sessions, the capacity plan, etc. This is our current agenda, and it is out on that website. So Zach, please take sharing back so we can talk about our next fun thing that's happening. We're going to be taking the Labor Day week off because we know it's a short one for everybody. So our next session is going to be held September 18th at noon Eastern. Shannon Hadley is going to cover setting up and managing the visitor kiosk. So hopefully you can join us then. We'll take one last peek for questions. I don't see anything in the chat.
Hang on
Jill,
1 second, Patty. Let me
okay.
grab that algorithm just while people are sitting here, and then we'll obviously email it out. But
Yeah, say Zach, just send it to Jill, and then we'll have Jill forward it to everybody who registered. That's going to be the easiest way.
all right.
We just lost your algo.
Well, who are you gonna believe, right? All right. Super simple. This is Twilight Zone stuff, so that's it. And I'll get it chopped out and thrown in into an email for Jill with some instructions.
Perfect. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. We know how valuable your time is, and we really appreciate you spending it with us. I'll be processing and uploading this to our YouTube channel this afternoon, so please check it out. There's a lot of content out there, so if you like what you see, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and spread the word. These sessions are no cost, no obligation. Those of you who've been coming for months know we don't call you up after this and try to, sell you anything. And they're available to everybody in the Plex community. So share the news, and anyone else with your company and anyone else who uses Plex. Have a great day, everyone. And once again, Zach, great job. You always make costing fun.
That's right. I hope nobody's asleep. Have a good one.